Hello, my name is Enos and welcome back to my channel. This is Work and Wonder. On this channel, I talk a lot about the mental health nursing OSCE. I can assure you that this is the only YouTube channel that talks about the mental health nursing OSCE. I take keen interest in the comments that my subscribers normally put under the various videos, and normally I go through them, and then if there is anything that you want me to do a video on, surely I'll make a video, and this is one of them. And as I said, or I've said in my previous videos, if I notice a growing trend in something that is failing people, I'll definitely also make a video on it. And today I'll be talking about the physiological observation, which is one of the skill stations or one of the 6 skill stations in the mental health nursing OSCE. We all know very well that physiological ops is vital science, and once you start your nursing career right from your first year in school and then you go on placement, usually this is one of the very first things that they will ask you to do as a student, checking BPs, checking temperatures, checking pulse, checking respirations. This is something that within your first year you do. The second year you're going to do it, third year, fourth year. And then by the time you are done with your school, you become a master at taking BPs and temperature. So taking or the process itself is not a problem. So people that have gone to take the exams, how to tie the cuff, how to check the temperature, how to check the pulse, and then how to also check the the respiration is not the problem. The problem here that I have noticed is the documentation. We know very well that you are going to do your documentation on what is called the NEW2 chart. And with the NEW2 chart, that's where you put your temperature, you put your BP, you put your respiration, your oxygen saturation. The problem has got to do with their documentation. A lot of people are not documenting well. They are skipping, if let's say the BP is supposed to be on the first column, either they are skipping it to the second one, or they are not putting, they are not writing what they need to write on it, and then they are also getting the NEW2 score wrong. They are not able to calculate it well, and at the end of the day, whatever intervention plan that they were supposed to put in place, they are not able to put it because they got the calculation wrong. So I am not going to go through the process at itself, like checking the BPs, because I don't have equipment to do that. But I'm going to take it to my PC, and then we are going to look at the NEW2 chart. We are going to look at how we are going to document. And then at the end of the day, we see some of the things that needs to be there, some of the things that does not need to be there, how to calculate the new score, and then how to escalate it if there's a need for you to escalate it at all. And then at the end, we'll see how the whole documentation is done. So let's go to my PC now, and then I'll show you how to do that. So welcome to my screen. As you can see, this is the NEW2 chart. So I'm going to zoom out. This is the NEW2 chart as you are seeing on the screen. And then usually this is the front page. So you can see it like this. And then when you go on the back of the page, this is what you're going to see. So this is where you would be recording your parameters, whether your BP, your oxygen saturation, your blood pressure, your pulse, and then your temperature. This is where you'll be recording it. So what I'm going to do is that I am going to zoom in, and then it's going to be a bit bigger, and then we are going to go through it, section by section. But first of all, this is what normally you're going to have. The first part, you're going to have the name, the date of birth, and then of course the date of admission as well. And then the very first box, the second one that you're going to find is the date and then the time. Then the next one is for respiration. The next one is oxygen saturation. Another one for oxygen saturation. Then we have oxygen, we have blood pressure, and then we have pulse. Then when you go below it, you're going to have consciousness level. Then the last one is the temperature. And then when you even go down below, you are going to find the total new score, and then the monitoring frequency, your escalation of care, and then the initials. And then when you turn the back of it, you are going to have this, which is going to show what you need to do as to what of the scores that you get. So to make it easier for us, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through it section by section. So I'm going to zoom in to make it bigger, and then we are going to go through it section by section, what you need to write there. So as you can see, I've made it a bit bigger for us. So first of all, what I'm going to do is that I have some details here that we'll be using. So the assumption is that we have gone through the procedure, we have attained our BP, which is 121 on 82, we have attained our temperature, which is 36.5, we have attained our respiration, which is 18, our SpO2, which is 97, and then our pulse, which is 71. So this is what we'll be working with. We are going to make sure that, we will record that on this particular sheet. So the very first thing that you see is the name of the patient, the date of birth, and then the date of admission. So we know from here the name of the patient is Enoch Fragrance, the date is this, and then we'll assume that's probably the date of birth is, let's say, the 10th of 1990. So we are going to work with that. So here, what we will need to do is to put the name of the patient here, which is Enoch Fragrance. So this is how you fill it out. Then we are going to have the date of birth, which is the 10th of the 9th, 1990, and then the date they said is the 9th of the 4th, 25. So that is we done with the very first part. That's the details of the patient. Now the second part is the date and then the time. You can see that the date and then the time is written here. So usually on your scenario, there is going to be a date, and then there is also going to be a time on it. So they'll say that assume it is today and then the time is 10 o'clock, or assume it is today and then the time is 12 o'clock. So let's assume here this is our date and then this is what our time. So in these boxes, each of these boxes represent a date and then a time. Please don't make that mistake. Some people have made a mistake of writing, let's assume today that is saying that the date is 9. The person will write 9/4/25, and then the time they write 10, and then they'll do this. If you do this, this is very wrong. Each of the boxes represent a date and then a time. So this is not how you are supposed to write it. And this is one of the things that people did and then it failed them. So please avoid doing this. Now let me show you the right way to do it. So I'll quickly pick an eraser and clean this. And then I'll show you how to do it. So each of these boxes represent a date and then the time. So this is what you need to write. So the date they said is 9/4/25. The box looks so small. If you cannot, everything cannot go into the box, you can just write the day and then the month, which is the 9/4, and that's also fine. But in my case, everything has gone into the box. Then the time they said we should check is 10 o'clock. So 10:00. So each of these boxes, they represent a date and then the time. So please don't do the very first one that I did to show you that it is wrong. So now that we are done with it, because it finds itself in this very box, we are going to follow those boxes throughout. So everything we are going to record, we are going to make sure that it goes all the way down. Whatever we are recording, whether BP, whether temperature, it is going to be following, or is going to be in these boxes. Now let's go down and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to clean this one first. So now it states that our respiration was 18. So 18 here, it says that when we check, the respiration was 18. So as you can see, normally it is more or less like a range. So here, if it is less than 8, then it's supposed to be in this box. If it is between 9 and 11, it's supposed to be in this box. And then if it's between 12 and 14, it's supposed to be in this box. It's between 15 and 17, it's supposed to be here. And if it's between 18 and 20, it's supposed to be here, in that order. So in our case, it was 18. So what it means is that it's supposed to be in this box. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to write 18 in this particular box. Let me make that one quite legible. I'm going to clean it and then I'll rewrite it again so that you clearly see what I mean by that. So because the 18 falls here, I'm going to put 18. And each of the boxes, you can see that they are colored. If you look at this one, where we wrote this one, it is white colored. Each of them corresponds to a number here. So if it is in the white, it is going to correspond to a number here. The white ones is 0. So all the white are 0. When it goes to the light yellow, that is a 1, and when it goes to the deep one, that is a 3. In that same case, the white here is a 0. If it goes to the light one, that is a 2, a score of 2. Then if it comes here, that is a score of 3. So whatever you get here, or wherever you are writing it, always make sure that you trace it to see the number that you have gotten. So in our case, it is 18 and it falls in the white box, so we get a score of what? 0. That is very, very, very simple. So now we've been able to record for the respiration. We are going to go ahead and record the other one. So I'm going to go a little bit downwards. Now, if we come here, we can see that we have oxygen saturation here, which is A plus B. And then we have another one here. There are two of them. We only use this particular one if your patient is on oxygen. But then if your patient is not on any oxygen and the person is breathing at room air, then we are going to use this particular one. But if you find your patient to be on oxygen, whether with nasal prongs or whatever they are using to deliver the oxygen, then we are going to use the second box. So if your patient is not on oxygen, is breathing on room air, normally you use this. But if your patient happens to be on a mask or in a nasal cannula or whatever it is, receiving artificial oxygen, then you are going to use the second box. But in most mental health cases, our patients are normally breathing at room air, so this is the one that normally you would be using. Now let's look at the one that we got for the, so here it says that the SpO2 or the oxygen saturation is 97, so we'll be recording that as well. So we'll come here, it is also ranges. If it is less than 91, then it's going to be here. If it is between 92 and 93, it's going to be here. If it's 94 to 95, it's going to be here. And if it is 96 and above, then it's going to be here. In our case, our patient scored 97, or the SpO2 of the patient was 97. So we'll quickly put that here. And in that same way, you can see that here, white, if it's in the white, is 0. If it is in the light yellow, it is 1. And then if it is in this one, it is 2. If it is here, it is 3. But you can see that our patient falls within the white one. So that is also going to give us a score of 0. Now let's move on to the next parameter, which is the oxygen or air. So you can see that here it's very, very important. Oxygen or air, what it simply means, or simply asking you is your patient on oxygen or your patient is breathing at room room air? If we look at this one, our patient is definitely not on oxygen. That is why we recorded it here. So here all we just need to do is to write an A in this particular column. If for some reason your patient was on some kind of oxygen, whether it is the max or it is a nasal cannula, then we will be recording that one in any of these boxes depending on which one your patient is on. And here, if it is on room air, then most definitely it is also going to be a 0. So here is in the white one, so it's also a 0. So here you need to be very, very careful. One of the things that have failed some of the people is that just refusing to write the A or forgetting to write the A here also failed them. So please make sure that you always write the A in that particular box if your patient is not on any oxygen. Now let's look at the BP. Our BP is 121/82. So our systolic is 121, and then our diastolic is 82, as we are seeing here. So this is what we'll be using, 121/82. Now when we come to the next column, it is for the blood pressure. As you can see with the blood pressure, they are also in columns. So our patient was on 121. So 121 is going to fall here. As you can see, 121 to 140. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 121. I'll clean that and then I write it. So that's 121/81. As you can see, it was 82. So what it means is that 82 is also going to fall within this column. So we are now going to write our 82 here. And then what we can do is we can simply do that. We can use an arrow to do this. Now I know some people will be asking, what about using a dot? Some people normally put a dot. They'll put a dot here and then they'll put a dot there, and then they are going to do this. I'm not a fan of the dot because when you put a dot, the dot does not tell you your exact figure that you got. So if you put a dot here and you put a dot here, What did the patient get for diastolic? I know that it is going to be between 81 and 90, but what was the exact figure that the patient had, or you had? What was the exact figure you had for the systolic? It does not tell, because it's just a dot that is in the box, and that does not tell you. And a patient, a candidate failed because they had said to him that he did not write the correct score that he got. So he got, let's say, 121, and then he put the dot there. But then the assessor said he had, let's say, 140. So he mixed the box. But then if the person had written the actual figure in the box, that would have gone a long way to redeem him. But because he just put a dot and then a dot, that was not able to redeem that particular candidate. So always please make sure that you write the actual figure in the box, whatever you had. Now with BP or with blood pressure, we always use the systolic to determine the score. You can see that here, if we were to use the diastolic, it would have been in this box, which would have been a 3. But with BP, we always use the systolic to determine the score. So we are going to use the top one to determine the score. In this case, you can see that it falls within the white one, which will give us a score of what? 0. Always remember, we always use the systolic. So I'm going to put it here. We use the systolic to determine the score. And in this case, it was 1, 2, and when we trace it all the way to this side, we can see that it falls within the white region, and that is going to give us a score of 0. Now we'll move on to the pulse. Now let's see what our patient scored for the pulse. Our patient scored 71. So we'll go down there and then we are also going to plot it. So 71, you can see clearly from here that 71 to what? 80. So we are going to put our 71 here in this box, because that is the range in which it falls. And of course, if we want to find a score for that, when we trace it all the way to this side, it's also going to be, or it's already in the white, that is also going to give us a score of 0. Now let's go to the consciousness level. Here, usually, if your patient is alert, your patient is speaking normally, your patient knows where he is, then you are going to put an A here, for which in most cases is going to be for mental health patient. But then if you have a patient that is confused, the patient doesn't know where they are, and all that, then you are going to put a C here, which is going to show that your patient is confused. If your patient can only respond to verbally, you speak to the patient, that is only when the patient is able to respond, or the patient respond to some form of talking. So sometimes you can see that they are unconscious, but then when you speak, their eyes are closed, but then they can still move. They are responding to voice, and in that case, you put a V here. And then if your patient is also responding to pain, so it's only when you pinch the patient that the patient moves, then you can also put a P here, which is pain. And then if your patient is unresponsive at all, then you are going to put a U here. But as I said, in most cases, it's either the patient is going to be alert or the patient is going to be confused, because they are going to present you with a patient who you can speak to, who can respond to you. So in most cases, it's going to be A. But then if you speak to the patient says he doesn't know his name, he doesn't know where he is, and all of that, then it's going to be a C. So anything apart from the patient being alert is going to give you a score of 3. But in most cases, as I said, our patient is going to be very much alert, and then they are going to be responding to you as you speak to them. If you ask them, where do you know your name, they will tell you their name, they will tell you where they are and all of that, and that is going to give you a score of what? 0. So it means our patient is very much alert. This A has also failed a lot of people because people did not record it. So always please make sure that you put the A there to show that your patient is alert in terms of their consciousness level. The last one is the temperature. So let's go up and then we'll see what our patient scored for temperature. Our patient scored 36.5. So we are going to go down to our temperature. When we come down here, we can see that it's also a range. It's 37.1 to 38. And then we have 36.1 to 37. So let's see again what our patient scored. Our patient scored 36.5. So what it will mean is that our patient falls within this range, which is 36.5. And that, when we also trace it to the score, is also going to give us a score of 0 because it falls within the white ones. So now we are done with recording the various parameters. We have our temperature, we have our consciousness level, we have our pulse, we have our blood pressure, we have our oxygen, we have our oxygen saturation, and we have our respiration. So now what we are going to do is we are going to calculate the new score. So what you're going to do is you take the score that the patient had for respiration, which was 0. You add it to the score of the oxygen saturation, which was 0. In this case, you can see here the patient also scored a 0 here, patient scored a 0 here. Then when we come to the air or oxygen, the patient also scored a 0. So that's a total of 0. We'll still go down. Talk about the blood pressure. I said we use the systolic, even though here you can see that the diastolic is giving us a score of 3, but we always use the systolic for the calculation. So here, systolic wise, our patient also scored a 0. So when we add 0 to the up zeros that we got, that's still a 0. So we'll now go to the pulse. You can also see here that our patient also scored a 0 for pulse. And then when we come to the consciousness level, our patient was alert, so that's another 0. And then the last one, which is temperature, our patient also scored a 0. So if we add all these zeros together, that is going to give us a total new score of what? 0. So you come to the total. So as you can see here, and then we are going to put 0 here. When we put 0 here, it means that is the total new score that we got. The scores that we had from all these areas, or this new score, that's what we put together, and that is a score of 0. Now let's go to the back of the sheet. Once you are done with this, go back to the back of the sheet. Now it says that if your patient scored a 0, then the frequency of monitoring is going to be 12 hours, and then you just continue your routine news monitoring. So this is what is supposed to be done. So we'll go back to this particular part. The monitoring frequency says that if it's 0, then it's supposed to be 12 hours. So all we are going to do is we'll put what? 12 hourly here. And then are we going to escalate or not? We are just going to continue with the routine news monitoring. So here it is going to be N, which is no, because there's no need for us to escalate because our patient scored a 0. It is only when the patient scores beyond 0 that you need to escalate. But when the patient scores a 0, there's no need for you to escalate because there's nothing to do. You are still going to continue with your routine monitoring. Then the initials, let's assume I'm the one doing it and my initial is Enos fragrance. I'll just put EF, and that is going to be me done with it. So as you can see, your score will determine what you are going to be writing here. Let's assume that we had a score of, let's say, 3. When we put, let's assume, so I'm going to clean that one for the temperature, and then I'm going to assume that our patient scored, let's say, 30. Our patient scored 38.5. So if our patient scored 38.5, it means it's going to be here. So it would have been 38.5. Sorry, I'll clean that again. It's quite difficult using my pen to navigate around. So 38.5 would have been here, 38.5. And if I trace it here, that would have given me a score of 1. So if I had added this 1 to the zeros that I got, that was going to give me, or that is going to give me a total new score of 1 because all the others are 0. So now I would have written my 1 here. And this time around, let me clean the frequency monitoring. And this time around, if I come down here, you see that if it is a score of 1 to 4, then the minimum should be 4 to 6 hours. So in terms of the frequency, it is going to be what? 4 to 6 hours. And now, am I going to escalate or not? Of course, I need to escalate because it says here that inform registered nurse who must assess the patient. Registered nurse decides whether to increase the frequency of monitoring or escalation. So here what it means is that I'll need to escalate to another colleague who will also come and assess. So in this case, yes, my escalation is going to be yes, which is going to be a Y. And then of course I'll put my initials. So that is how the recording for this side would have changed if it had gone beyond 0. So anything beyond 0, the interpretation is at the back here. So for example, if I had 3 in any of the single parameters, so for example, what this means is that if for any reason I had, let's say, pulse. This time around, let's use the pulse. I'm going to clean this particular pulse. Let's assume that our pulse was, the pulse that I had was 135. If this was my pulse, that means it's going to be here. As you can see, 135. And then if I trace it all the way, that was going to give me a score of 0. So just the pulse alone is giving me a score of 3. So what this means is that if for one of them, like for this one that we've gotten 3, then irrespective of what the patient had in the other ones, then it is going to be what? 1 hourly. So assuming I had 0, 0, 0, 0, and for only pulse I had 3, then my frequency or my monitoring frequency this time around here is going to be what? 1 hourly. That is because I've had just a score of 3 in one of the parameters. Then let's move to the other ones. If a total of 5 or more, urgent response. So here, if I added them together and then I've got a score of 5 or more, then that would have been an urgent response, and then the monitoring frequency would have also been 1 hourly, and this would have been my clinical response. So registered nurse to immediately inform the medical team caring for the patient, registered nurse to request urgent assessment by a clinician or a team or a core competency in the care of the acutely ill patient, provide clinical care in an environment with monitoring facilities. So you can see how the scores can tell you or can change the frequency at which you'll be monitoring it. So it's normally dependent on the score that you are going to get. And usually when you do your physiological ops, you will have to let the patient know the clinical response. So for example, if I had, let's say, a score of 2, I would have told the patient that I did your vital signs, and out of this vital signs, you had a score of, let's say, 3. Your BP was slightly up. It was, let's say, 38.1, or it was 37.1. Your pulse was also a little bit high. It was 102. So I'll let the patient know the parameters with which those ones were high and what is giving the score of that 3 or that 2 or that 1. And then of course I also let the patient know that in this case I'll be informing another nurse who will also come and assess you, and then at the end of it to be determined whether to increase the frequency at which you'll be monitoring it or not. And then if it is for any of these, you also have to let the patient know their clinical response, and then you would if it is something like you had 3 in one of the parameters, you also go ahead, keep on to reassure the patient. So that is how you record on your NEW2 chart. As you can see, it's pretty much straightforward, and then try as much as possible to always fill all the parts that needs to be filled. Most importantly, this particular one, which is the air or oxygen, just because of an A, they can fail you. And then of course the consciousness level, which is called the ACAPU. When we come here, I'll go a little bit up where you also have to write the A. Where is it? Yes, the consciousness level. This part, just not refusing or forgetting to write an A can also fail you. So please make sure that you always write your A, or if the patient is very, very conscious, you write your A. So here I'll put some points here for you, which is your consciousness level. Always try to always do it, and of course whether it is on air, the patient is breathing in room air, or on oxygen as well. Then the last thing is the BP. You normally use the systolic. You use the systolic to calculate the score. Some people have used the diastolic and then they have failed. Always use the systolic to also calculate the score. So these are what you need to take note of in terms of when you are recording on your NEW2 chart. I hope you have gotten at least a concept, and then this one was also helpful. All right, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope this video was very, very helpful. Now you know how to do your documentation the right way, and then I expect you to go and then you pass your physiological observation. Now there is a couple of documents that if you want to have access to, like my API booklet, like if you want to join the WhatsApp group, there are links below or in the description box. Just click on them and then it's going to send you straight away to either the site where you can get the booklet. The booklet you can find physiological observation, scenarios which you can practice with. If it's the API booklet, you can find scenarios in assessment, planning, implementation. There's a whole lot in these books that can be very helpful in terms of your preparation. And then the last link is going to be the link to the WhatsApp group. If you want to join, you can click on it and then straight away you can also join. The WhatsApp group is helpful because people do ask questions, and then there's interactions that are solely related to your preparation to the mental health nursing OSCE exams there, which can be really, really helpful or can form part of your preparation process. So that has been the video for today. My name is Enos and this is Work and Wonder. Until I see you in my next video, it is a bye for now.